Hello, hello. Happy Father's Day. Happy Juneteenth. Family and freedom. If you add firearms, you have perhaps the holy trifecta of libertarianism, but there are few things that we value more than our families and our freedom and our right to raise our families in as free a way as possible, doing what's best for them. I hope you all are celebrating what we do have. I hope you all are having a peaceful holiday. I hope you all are having a redemptive holiday and feel great coming out of it so that we can start doing big things. So much to do, so much left to do. I will tell you this, it feels like our rights are being chipped away all the time, because they are. But I've lived in places like China where it's so much further gone than it is here. Appreciate what we have and fight for it and fight to take back what's been taken from us, because it matters. And when it's gone, I'll tell you from personal experience, it is not a good look. Today's episode, season 3, episode 4, I am really excited about. First of all, our guest, Michael Gibson, author of Paper Belt on Fire, one of my favorite books, got it for Christmas, read it in a day. I've read it again since then. Michael breaks down what he calls the paper belt. It is the credentialing system that exists through elementary school, into high school, into colleges. What college did you go to? How does that get you through the door? At what institution? Doesn't matter what you know or don't know. Actual achievement is being, I suppose, subverted. It's not given, or deprioritized would be a better word, but extensively deprioritized over simply the credentials that you have. Oh, you went to this school, you must get in. And it is leading to wholesale indoctrination and causing stagnation in terms of innovation. We really get into libertarian solutions to problems, how the free market can help. We look at where the education system is broken and what we can do to fix it. Then, as our opener, instead of a legislative update this week, we take a little extra time to look at the event in Gastonia that went on Saturday, the 15th. Mike Ross led the event. Spike Cohen came and spoke, but it was all in support of Pastor Moses Colbert. You all have been following this, know we've been talking about it nonstop, but the city of Gastonia is vindictive and petty tyrants run it. And they've charged him, they fined him $60,000 on top of a whole bunch of other fines for literally feeding the homeless. And I say that, and I say it sarcastically many episodes, but we have some video. You can see what he does. People come in and they eat. And Mike and Spike and Thomas Hill and so many others share their stories, including some of the people whose lives Pastor Moses has saved. And then finally, as always, Dub and Brew Talk Sports. If you're not watching this, it's funny, it's deliberately corny in a brilliant way, and it's really, truly intelligent and insightful. This week, they look at the gambling bill, what it means, where it matters. So I hope you all enjoy. As always, if you have any questions, any comments, any feedback, communications@lpnc.org, or if you want to be a guest or have a suggestion for a guest, want to jump on the panel, trying to get everyone from North Carolina involved. You're the ones who do this. This movement is us. We are the movement. So let's get moving. Enjoy the episode. We got Mike Ross, Gaston County, probably the front man working on this whole thing with Pastor Moses and Josh Aurora, also governor candidate for North Carolina. Mike, just talk to me a little bit about what this means to you.
Yeah, I mean, this is, to me, this is a really clear libertarian issue. We have a local government attempting to weaponize ordinances against a church who's doing the mission of the church, right? I mean, feeding people every single day, lunch and dinner, that's what they do here. They also operate as a church, right? And then what they really don't like at the city level, the city seems to be trying to take the approach of homelessness of just drive all of the homeless people out of Gastonia so they're not our problem. Talk to anybody who's ever had to camp, on the side of an interstate or something like that, they will run you off of there. Pastor Moses says, hey, I've got land. You can set up a tent here and I won't run you off. That's a direct counterbalance to what the city is trying to do. And that's why they're weaponizing the codes. Again, they're $60,000 in fines for 2 future mobile classrooms that are not even being used.
Which, by the way, substance abuse treatment, mental health treatment, job training, and just basic human things like, here, get cleaned up. here's some lunch and a shower.
You would think the city would be like jumping on board
Thank
to
you.
help and thank.
Yeah. How can we help?
Because that's what people need. And my big question to the city is, if you succeed in shutting this church down and stealing this property, what happens on day one to all the people who get hungry and need somewhere to go for lunch that very first day? What about dinner that day? What about lunch and dinner the next day and every day?
What about the person who's been clean for a year, who's looking for a reason that day?
The city is so focused on growth at all costs and revitalization that, in my opinion, they're just completely ignoring basic constitutional rights. I mean, to tell a church that's doing nothing other than feeding and sheltering people that they need to operate as a church, like their cease and desist letter last year, is just evil. It's just evil, if you ask me.
Well, Mike, thank you very much for doing this. Thank you for being here. We'll be getting video all throughout the day, so catch up with you again.
Thank you.
So everyone, as you can see, this is what goes on. So Pastor Moses, I understand what you're doing right now is criminal activity.
Oh, well, I don't know. That's debatable. Huh? You want seconds? Okay, yeah. Who you putting on that food at?
In my stomach?
Okay, well, that's what makes it. You hungry, kind of? You still hungry?
Yeah, that's good.
You sure? You want seconds? No time. She's going to look ready. Okay.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
There we go. Mr. Spike Cullen, Mr. Thomas Hill, thank you all for being here. Libertarian Party of North Carolina, Libertarian Party of South Carolina, Vice Presidential nominee for the Libertarian Party, and you are the power. Can you all just talk to me about what this means to you?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we're here to show support for Pastor Moses and for the entire community here in Gastonia that's coming together to help those in need here in Gastonia. Pastor Moses and the folks that are working with him with faith, hope, and love, they recognize that homelessness isn't usually just a problem of having a lack of a house. There's usually a lot of other issues that come with it, whether it's mental health issues or addiction issues or lack of occupational training, criminal record, all sorts of things that with help they can get over and they can get back on their feet and be able to help themselves and be productive and happy and healthy members of society. The problem is the city government here in Gastonia doesn't want that. They don't want these folks to be able to get help. They don't want them to get back on their feet. They don't want them to be in a safe place or to be able to get help or to be able to get back on their feet or anything like that. They want them in a bad place. They want a homelessness crisis so they can grandstand on the suffering and on that crisis and push to get reelected and to get more money and to get money for homelessness programs and all sorts of other stuff. And at the core of that is it's politicians who aren't respecting anyone here as human beings. They don't respect Pastor Moses. They don't respect the folks he's helping. They don't respect anyone here. They see them as obstacles and opportunities for their political goals and their political power. And so we're here to show support for Pastor Moses. And on Tuesday, we're going to show up and demand that they show some respect for Pastor Moses and for the folks here as well.
And Thomas, as everyone can see behind you, this is the crazy crime of feeding people.
Yeah, it was so inspiring to me, I decided to become a member of the church. And I'm happy to serve. I'm the state coordinator of You Are the Power. And I got to know Pastor Moses through the Gastonia activism and Joshua Rohr's case. And it's an honor and privilege to stand by our brothers and sisters that just need help, maybe taking a wrong turn in life. We should be lifting them up. And we're not handing out anything. We're reaching and giving a hand up to our brothers and sisters. That's all we're doing. And no matter what your religion, creed, what have you, it all comes down to loving your neighbor enough to reach out and help them, respect their rights, to live their life as they see fit. If they stumble, hold them accountable, but lift them up and help us all be better people and better neighbors. That's what it's all about. And that's why it's such a blessing to be a friend of Spike Cohen and be a part of You Are the Power. And the Libertarian Party of North Carolina. They have been in this from the very beginning. And I'm blessed to have membership in both organizations.
Thomas has been at the beginning of this with everything that we've been doing here to try to get justice for everyone in Gastonia, for Joshua Rohr, for Pastor Moses and for everyone else that's involved. But you brought up something. You brought up the crime that's happening here. Let's just look at this real. This is what the City Council of Gastonia thinks is dangerous criminal activity.
I see people eating.
Yes. See, most normal people who aren't psychopaths look at this and say, wow, this is good. People who are in need are getting help. But if you're a politician or you're a bureaucrat, you look at this and say, I wonder if I've been given enough money. I wonder if they've paid me off enough. I wonder if I can grandstand on this to get elected or re-elected or get some program passed. And if the answer to that is no, that they can't use it as an opportunity, now it's an obstacle.
Yep.
Now it's something bad. Now this is dangerous criminal activity. We have Robert Kellogg, a city council member who I believe he's decided he's going to run for mayor. He has said publicly on his social media, on his Facebook, he has said that it would be better for these folks to be living out on the streets than for them to be getting help from Pastor Moses without Pastor Moses paying off the politicians first. That's who we're dealing with here.
He just announced on social media he's going to put out his Robert Kellogg for Mayor plan for dealing with crime and homelessness, and I'm just ready for him to name it the final solution.
Yeah, just about. I mean, literally, his plan could have one bullet point: let Pastor Moses continue fixing it.
And then 32 people wouldn't have died of exposure a couple years ago.
Exactly. And that's the problem, is it's not about solving homelessness. It's about his political ambitions. And I don't want to single him out too much, because this isn't just about him. There's an entire city council and a current sitting mayor. And frankly, if you replace them with a bunch of other politicians,
Gonna get the same thing.
This is the exact same thing. The problem is that government has way too much power and way too little accountability, and this is how they use it. To look at something like this and call it criminal activity and try to shut it down. That's the problem here. That's why we're showing up to the city council. We're not just saying you're bad people and you need to stop. We're saying this way of disrespecting people needs to end.
But not only we're not saying you're bad people, we're inviting them over to our side.
I would love for them to see
We will welcome with open arms.
Absolutely.
With open arms.
I was hoping one or two of them might be here. I would love for them, even if they continue thinking that Pastor Moses is in the wrong,
Just
show
come
up
see.
and see what's happening. Show up and say you want to be part of the solution, even if you disagree with us on how it should be done, but show that you actually care.
Yeah, understand what you're shutting down.
But there's no political opportunity
No.
for them here, and that's the problem. So we're going to make it politically expedient for them to back off.
I love it. Well, thank you all very much. I will be shooting more video of you as we go throughout, but thank you.
Thank you.
But this is really important. I wanted everybody to come out and see this, because when you read the press associated with how the news, whether it's the Gazette, whether it's all the other stations, they want you to think that this place is a horrific place that is dangerous, and the people who come here are suffering.
With Pastor Moses, I've been gasping on board of the hospital. I had surgery where they had burst me open like a piece of beef. No place to go. I couldn't get out of the hospital until I had a stable place to live.
But my question is to the city. I want to address this to the city of Gastonia. If you get federal grant money to help these people, but all the people over here, we need to know where the money's going. I call everybody the pastor. He is a great man. When I came to him, I was broken down and I was busting and discussing, but I was working on my life at the time. I was already alcohol free at the time, but he kept me to stay on that path. You know, I stayed on that path because I seen what he was doing. I got inspired by what he was doing, not just for me, but for the people.
We got married here actually. This is true. We've been here for like a year. I was a lot, but I see a lot, and I see a lot of change, good and bad. But I changed for myself. For a while, I was lost and had to find my way and didn't know where I was going to go, what I was going to do. So while I was spiritual, gave me time to learn myself and figure myself out. So now I'm working and trying to get in my life.
Amen. Amen. You know, this is all about the city doesn't want homeless people in Gastonia.
Yes.
Well, you know what? Too bad.
Too bad.
We're going to, my plan is, let's go be seen. All together, whether you're here part of the ministry Let's all go together because we're all humans.
That's
right. And it's time we demand that they do the right thing. So let's march. And then if you can be here Tuesday night, city council meeting, let's pack that room and let them know that we, the people of Gastonia, are not going to let them take over this church because there are way too many people whose lives depend on this place.
That's right. Absolutely.
Hey, what's up, everyone? And thank you for joining us again. I am extra stoked about our guest tonight. I was saying right before this to him that I'm fanboying out a little bit. The author of Paper Belt on Fire and one of the founders of the 1517 Fund. I'm telling you, if you read his book, Paper Belt on Fire, the biographical part, add in a little bit of drugs and debauchery, and you essentially have Kerouac's on the road. It's crazy, except it turned into how we can, in a very libertarian way, revamp our entire credentialing system, higher education system, and take the power away from people who have appointed themselves. It is my pleasure to bring on Michael Gibson. Michael, how are you doing today?
Good. Well, thanks for having me on. That's a great intro. I love the on the road reference because while I didn't exactly write with that book in mind, I do love Kerouac's energy. One thing I noticed, though, is that in some of the pushback against the book and pushback against what we do as a fund, backing people without degrees, I noticed that somehow this is the new counterculture. This is part of this flipping where in the 1950s, the establishment was this staid, boring, conservative man in the gray flannel suit, the organization man, Don Draper as portrayed in Mad Men. And then the counterculture is like Kerouac and the Beats and later on people doing drugs and the hippies. And so what's funny to me now is that has flipped where it's like, now you have the left as the staid, oppressive, anti-individualistic establishment, and the counterculture is, the libertarians and whatever comes out of what we invent and create.
And it's amazing that, so we are told that the left is the progressive left, and the truth is it's the anti-progressive left, and that's where we've kind of gotten to. And I think the libertarian philosophy is, and I really want to get into this with you in terms of solutions and innovation, but we are the progressive philosophy. We are trying to advance humanity naturally, not by a planned, designed outcome, just anti-free market stance. So for those of you who have not read the book, and everyone should go out and buy the book and read it. And I'm plugging it because Michael's on, but I'm serious. I reviewed this book in the newsletter in January. If you get a chance, I picked it up the day after Christmas. It was a Christmas present, and I was done by the 27th. I just couldn't put it down. So the book talks about Michael's life to an extent, but also the founding of the 1517 Fund. So we'll get to how you got there quickly, but you want to tell everyone what the 1517 Fund is and why you chose that name specifically?
Yeah, names are big in my life in the book. And 1517 stands for it's a geeky reference to the Protestant Reformation. And while we're not a deeply religious fund, we saw a historical parallel that we wanted to use. And I noticed whenever I wore numbers on t-shirts, people would ask about it at events and stuff. So 1517 is the year that Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the church door. Apocryphally, apparently, there's not a whole lot of evidence to support that he actually did it, but that nevertheless, let's roll with that. And what Luther was protesting at the time was the centralized bureaucratic church of the 16th century was selling a piece of paper called an indulgence. And this piece of paper could absolve you of your sin. You just had to hand over money to the church, could save your family members. Maybe you sin, you get absolved, then you sin again, whatever, you can keep paying for it. And this really pissed Luther off. So he nailed his 95 Theses to the church door, protesting the sale of these indulgences. So the first analogy is that we thought, wow, interesting. There is a heavily centralized form of education today. In our society, it seems as though there is only one path to the American dream, which is you must go to college. This institution also issues a piece of paper, and we're not quite sure about the substance underlying it. And they say, if you don't have one, you go to hell. And this piece of paper is called the diploma. So that was the analogy at the first level. The next level is that there were other people who were upset with the church in Rome long before Luther, but their writings never spread anywhere, or their church was able to counteract what they were
keep them
suggesting.
washed.
Yeah. And so it was really the printing press had been around for, about 50, 60 years, but it hadn't been diffused throughout Europe to the extent that it had. So by the time Luther nailed his theses to the door, the powder keg was set. And in essence, he became the first shit posting viral listicle, right? It was like this thing that just went like wild across Europe. So there you had a technological change there that enabled reform. The last thing that is somewhat, maybe a lighter theme that I think is important is that say what you will about, understanding God and the Bible. The Protestant Reformation, though, was certainly about returning judgment to people's own conscience. And, we think something like that might be needed as well in terms of, what we're learning, how valuable it is. Should we subject ourselves to this indoctrination and those sorts of things? So, yeah, I went with 1517. And I relay some of the story about like how I tested that idea in the book, and so far so good. It does seem to be the case that people want to know what that number means.
And that's why I brought it up first. There's an interesting analogy. When the printing press came out, the concern was that, the poor people might get educated. Educated. Now it's the language has changed. It's no, you're not educated, but what they're really worried about, again, is people being educated instead of indoctrinated.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a total attempt to control and discipline people. And you saw this let's say in another way with biopower during COVID, where these institutions, CDC, FDA, so on, under the guise of, the betterment of everyone's health, they exercised quite a bit of power. And I think the same, health is interesting. There's something weird about humans, I think, where
we get scared.
With health or with education too. It's like, no amount of money is too much. No amount of concern is too much.
There's no risk analysis. It's just fear.
Right. And so I think that the state does, exercise such a monumental control over education because of that impulse. Because it's hard to explain. It's not in other sectors of the economy. I mean, look, with public education, K through 12, there's a Kremlin in every small town. It's absurd, the level of socialism that we just accept, and no one questions. That's so bizarre to me. The state, okay, I understand that we might want them to subsidize education if the case is there, but the fact that they produce it as well, I mean, that is.
We're not even having a conversation about. Yeah. What role should the state be in financing and the morality of taxes? Like, because I'm a hashtag abolish public education, but
okay, yeah.
But in all seriousness, I can understand, like, if we must be taxed, if there must be some sort of tax and revenue distribution, and we're trying to educate the kids, okay, but you're not trying to educate the kids. You are enforcing your standard on them,
right?
And so. I would love you to break this down, because you talk about the FDA, the CDC, you talk about the entire the paper belt, and that's what you call it from the
right. Yeah. So it's to go to that name. So yeah, when I was writing the book, it's a difficult book to name, and I wanted something that captured a large part of what we do touches on education. So the story is obviously going to involve commentary on that. But it seemed as though, to me, at any rate, that the educational question was part of a larger set of questions about institutional performance in the United States, that some of these mainstay foundational institutions were not living up to their mission, maybe even counteracting against their mission. That could be the Federal Reserve, let's say, or it could be the CDC, it could be universities, it could be the media. All of these, I think, in the last, certainly in the last 30 years, but with greater intensity over the last decade, their performance has declined. And so with a buddy of mine, I was jamming with a buddy of mine. I think it was back in like 2013 or so. And he had this concept of the paper belt. So the Rust Belt refers to the hollowed out industries of the Midwest, whether due to globalization or technological change. Nevertheless, a lot of these cities have been hollowed out, these industries. And we were theorizing that with certain advances, especially in things like crypto, maybe the gales of creative destruction would start sweeping against some of the institutions and industries on the East Coast. And so he came up with this idea of the paper belt, referring to Washington, D.C. to Boston. Sometimes that's, the I-95 corridor. But the one thing those institutions all have in common is that they depend on paper. So it's like in D.C., they print laws on
And
paper,
money.
regulations on paper, visas on paper. In Delaware, people incorporate on paper. In New York Times, Wall Street Journal, print on paper, Madison Avenue ads on paper. And then as the arch symbol of higher education in Boston, MIT and Harvard have diplomas on paper. Now, it's not just a geography, it's also a configuration of power. And one of the things that stood out to me about that was if you rely on paper, if an institution uses paper to service its mission, let's say the Federal Reserve creates money, in part with the Treasury Department, there are these pieces of paper, and then they authenticate that this is real or counterfeit, right? And then they also are supposed to guard its value, that, whatever this piece
Which is
of
where the
paper
danger
signals.
comes in. Yep.
Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt. Yes.
And then, and likewise, we could think of Harvard. Harvard has a diploma. They are supposed to authenticate that if I didn't go to Harvard and I claim I did, and I have a fake Harvard diploma, they're going to let the world know that. And then they also, like the Federal Reserve, are supposed to guarantee some substance to the signal that this piece of paper sends. So it seems to me over the last, especially over the last 10 years, but going back quite a bit to the 70s, that the people who are working in these institutions, either through corruption or incompetence, or maybe just sclerosis in the bureaucracy, they're becoming less trustworthy and reliable in their ability to, one, authenticate what those pieces of paper mean, and then to preserve the substance of what they are. So to me, that was like, okay, here's the broad theme I want to talk about. I see how education plays a role, but I want, a lot of what we've worked on over the last decade has also, cut a line through some of these other institutions. So I wrote that, and I wrote this as a LinkedIn mission statement. I said my mission, I gave that little spiel in LinkedIn about the Rust Belt and the paper belt. And then I ended it saying my mission in my career is to light the paper belt on fire.
That's awesome. Wrote it down.
And so my publisher, Encounter Books, the editor there, saw that and said, wow, this could make a really great title. And I was like, okay, yeah, I like that as well, because then the imagery on the book cover, but it's like, you can't judge a book by its cover. I think, the flames are catching to the eye. But that said, I have to say, it's like, I notice it's like the people who reach out to me most tend to be those who want to hear the educational story. But I do think it's set in this background of institutional failure. And then this larger idea that, we're stagnating as a society in ways that people don't really acknowledge. So
and that's the part that I actually find more interesting. It's just, you can't talk about that without talking about the power of credentialing and the education side. So you mentioned the paper of Harvard and MIT. So
right.
I got my MBA from Wake Forest.
Oh, well.
I mean, I liked it. It's a good program. If you're thinking about an MBA, I recommend it. But I applied to like 6 places, and I chose Wake Forest, although it was way more expensive than the others. Because I was like, I don't know if my MBA is going to help me, but I know that having MBA from Wake Forest is going to help me. Like, it was 100% a decision based on credentialing. And then I read your book and I'm like, yeah, this is confirming that that's going on everywhere. So you look, there's not a single person watching this video that's going to disagree on the power of universities. And in particular, when you talk about they have to protect their value, this is where you start to talk about the system they've created that leads to stagnation. So you need this piece of paper to walk through that door, where you get another piece of paper to walk through that door. And that's how you move up in the government and all of their their chosen mediums of progression in a
Right.
job. So I really do want to get into like free market solutions, but can you talk
Yeah.
a little bit about how that credentialing system has caused this stagnation?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, where do I begin?
Yeah.
I think, well, like, okay, going back to that, the mini rant that I began with about a Kremlin in every town. I think we are in the dark ages when it comes to our knowledge about how to educate people and how people learn. I say that because we know so little about how to motivate people, about the best techniques for learning. And what's funny is in the research that I did on the book is like, I look into this and then there is some research out there and there are people who have worked on this, but here's the funny thing. None of their research has been translated into practice. So you have schools across America.
It's like communism. It looks great.
Yes, exactly. So all the critiques that libertarians have about why socialism doesn't work apply to education. Like, why would we think that a socialist system would derive the best ways of learning over 100-year period? It just wouldn't, right? There would be, because you can't have new entry. Insiders block new entry. You can't experiment. It's so hard. Therefore, it's going to be very difficult to innovate. So when the stagnation thesis broadly is that since about 1970 or so, the rate of progress has slowed down in all but one area. The one area where we
can I jump in right there, because that's important.
Yeah,
and like I'm 42 years old. 1970, we're closer to 2070 now. Like it's been going on for a long time. This is not.
So and it's important also to say that progress hasn't been zero. But it's just that the advances that were made from, call it either like, let's say the end of the Civil War, 1870 to 1970, is just astonishing, the amount of progress that was made. The invention of the elevator, radio, airplanes,
discovery
jets,
of nuclear power.
Right, nuclear power, putting a man on the moon. It's really extraordinary to go from horseback in the Old West to putting a man on the moon in less than, I think it's like about 70 years, something like that. Or like if you go to Kitty Hawk to Apollo, it's quite extraurnary. So that rate of progress was really fast, and it touched so many areas of American life, and around the world for that matter.
For what it's worth, if I'm not mistaken, I believe when the Wright brothers were beginning on Kitty Hawk, and that's 4 hours from me.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm there every summer. I'll be there in a couple of weeks. But New York Times came out the next day with what? Gonna take 10,000 years before a man flies, and then the Wright.
Oh yes, it's a phenomenal story. I highly recommend. Here's a book I love on the Wright brothers, is the David McCullough biography, because it's obviously gonna it's gonna make me ecstatic, because one, these guys had no college education. They were self-taught, homeschooled. They had a library at home. And two, they discovered how to fly against all these other incumbents who were funded by universities and the government. It's like they received no money. It's like the leading horse in that race for the government was like the head. I can't remember this guy from the Smithsonian or something, and he tried to launch a plane off a boat in the Potomac, and it hit the water and sank.
I didn't know that. Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's stories like that really inspire me. But yeah, out at Kitty Hawk, and then to get to the moon in less than a century, that's
crazy.
Really impressive. So if you look at 1970 to the present, okay, I can acknowledge and grant that computers and communication technologies, I mean, we're having this call on Zoom and we can all look at our phones and they're pretty wonderful, marvelous things. But if you go other sector by sector by sector, take energy, nuclear power was banned, or just the regulatory burden was so high, it's just cost prohibitive.
Georgia did just open a new one.
I know, but if you look at the history of that, it took forever and massive amounts of money. Yeah.
$30 billion. Yeah.
Right. And then you can compare America actually to other countries now. So it's like South Korea can build a nuclear reactor, I think, for $2 billion, but in the United States, it's upwards to 10. just for all the compliance issues. So naturally, there's no innovation in that. And that's like third generation nuclear. So we're not even talking like some people, especially now that there's revived interest in it. It's like we have fourth generation, possibly fifth generation generators. So energy creation, education. I don't think we've gotten better at educating people.
Oh, and you talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
You've arguably gotten worse at educating people.
Yeah, right. I mean, I was astonished to learn that 23% of Californian adults are functionally illiterate, meaning they can read a few things, but like if you hand them a legal contract, they won't know what it says.
So I'm in Charlotte. You want to guess how? And they're big on DEI. You
Yeah.
want to guess how many Black and Hispanic students are reading on grade level?
Jeez, I'm scared to ask. What, less than 50%, huh?
13.
Jeez.
Yeah. But
God, yeah. So it breaks your heart.
yeah, it's
How is this
you're destroying
acceptable?
their kids. They can't even read it. Like
Yeah.
forget like what higher education might do. They can't read. And this is the direction we've gone because the government's getting involved in things.
Right. And there's no innovation. There has to be a way to teach people and it's not only just about learning, it's also like, setting people up for life. So yeah, education, you could look at healthcare and medicine. It seems like we live in an age of marvels, but when you look at the broader sweep of history, in 1900, the life expectancy at birth in the United States was, I think it's something like 43, 44. You had a lot of people dying in childbirth, or mothers dying.
Young.
And then you had just lots of, people, the sanitation was quite poor. Nevertheless, across from 1900 to 1980, you had the discovery of the antibiotics, steroids, heart transplants, just a lot of miracles. And by 1980, the life expectancy is up to something like 73. Well, okay, that is really amazing. That, 30 years or so added to everyone's life is extraordinary. But then from 1980 to the present is not
And it's gone up 4 years, but now it's gone down like a year and a half.
Yeah, and I don't think we're all the way back down to where we were in 1980, but it's pretty close. It's something like 74 years or 70. It's so even though we've had some advances over that time, the cost of the care has gone up and the marginal improvement in people's lives has been quite small. So, to me, that's okay. The rate of progress has slowed down quite a bit. So yeah, I could keep going through these things, but I the arguments in the book, and there are other people out there. The Great Stagnation by Tyler Cowen's good. Robert Gordon has a book.
Eric Weinstein talks about this all the time.
Eric Weinstein, yeah,
especially in physics. He's like, and he
right.
says it's the same thing. Credentialed people who are married to string theory who won't allow discussion, counter arguments.
Yeah, so go to the heart. Like, what is the edifice? What is like the center castle tower in the university? It is something like physics, where okay, we can allow the universities all these troubles, but that, you know what, they're making progress and they're advancing science, and this is going to benefit mankind. But if we attack the center position and show that it's empty, it's almost like its greatest vulnerability. Exactly. So yes, part of the problem is that there are so many specialists out there, and the subject matter is so complex that it scares everyone. But I think it's pretty broad agreement right now, and even to the layman, that the era of Einstein, from his miracle year in 1905 when he publishes his first three great papers, all the way to let's say the 1960s or so, just an incredible revolution in physics, quantum mechanics, relativity. And then from then to the present, okay, we've made some marginal advances, but we still have no idea. It's fun. If we talk in terms of our ignorance, it is really wild how little we know.
Yeah.
And how incomplete
how much we don't know.
Yeah, how incomplete even Einstein's theory is, right? We can't unify relativity with quantum mechanics. It just doesn't work, and no one has figured that out, and it's a mystery. So how does this relate to credentialing? So yeah, okay, we talked about education.
It's the stagnation, and specifically, as you answer this, can you explain what the 1517 fund does, the exact rules?
Okay, so yeah, so it's like, I think our society just doesn't trust younger people to do things. In order to be trustworthy, in order to receive a grant and spend money and conduct experiments or invent things, it's like you talked about it. It was like there are all these layers where you need a piece of paper to get deeper and deeper inside. So you get your undergrad, then you get your PhD, and your PhD. Okay, well, in 1920 it used to take 4 years, but now it takes 8 years, and
Your fellowship, your mentor.
right.
If the wrong person goes against you, this is a big argument that Robert Kennedy Jr. makes in his book, The Real Anthony Fauci, which is a terrifying book. I haven't read a counter to it yet. I saw it, but just the fact that Fauci's was the credential, like,
Yeah, totally.
roll at the bridge, like show your pass or else.
So, yeah, the incentives of the ivory tower work against unorthodox, innovative ideas. To get into grad school, everyone has the same grades and all the same GRE scores, let's say. What gets you in are the recommendations from your professors. Well, how do you get those recommendations? Well, by kowtowing, sucking up, genuflecting to those people. Okay, you add a decimal
We're having
point.
money.
Right. Then you get into grad school. Okay, who's going to advise you on your PhD? Well, the guy who, you get to co-author a paper with the primary investigator and advance his research program. Or, you add a decimal point to his view. Okay, you get your PhD. What's next? Okay, you get tenure track. How are you going to get tenure? Well, it's not by proposing outlandish ideas that might fail. What you're going to do is cut as close as possible to the consensus while adding something new. And it's incrementalism. So yeah, I think the incentives of the ivory tower.
You know what though? I think so much of the time you don't even add something new. You just find a clever new way to say the same old thing.
Okay, yeah, or that, right. I mean, right, because doing something new would be just too costly.
Exactly. So along those lines, last question before we bring a few more people on. In the 1517 fund, so you're bringing on kids. I mean, they're not kids, but they're not adults.
Yeah. It's so funny. My co-founder, Danielle Strackman, she's great. She founded a charter school in San Diego. And she has this aversion to the word kids because she thinks it belittles the agency and autonomy of young people. She thinks it means we're diminishing them in some way. And I get that it's harsh. So I write a chapter where I introduce her in the book, and in the chapter, I sort of wink at her as "Leave Them Kids Alone" from Pink Floyd.
I like using kids because of sort of the two middle fingers to the establishment. I'm not trying to be a kid, but it's like get over yourself too, because this is the whole point of what I want to get to. All these kids, no college degrees. You have kids. I mean, they're in early 20s.
Yeah.
One of them, I believe, has created a sensor system that's like factors of 10 better than the one Tesla's using for its self-driving.
So what did we do to fight the great stagnation? Okay, we wanted to get people to the frontier of knowledge as fast as possible. And we wanted, if you were starting a business, we wanted to, okay, don't waste your time in school and class. You can learn by doing. So we back and support a range of things. Sometimes it is just like, hey, this person created enterprise SaaS, and that doesn't seem magical. It is to me, but it's a business. But sometimes, okay, we do meet people who are working on the edge of some scientific frontier. And Austin Russell, you've alluded to, incredibly talented young man. We met when he was 18. He had been working in photonics labs since he was 13. He was just like a lab rat in Orange County at UC Irvine and some of the labs associated with that. And so he just developed lasers that could do things no one had done before, whether it was intensity or certain wavelengths. And when we met him in 2013, he had invented these lasers, but he didn't really have a use case yet. At first, he thought it could be used to actually make irrelevant the green screens at the time in Hollywood. You could use the LiDAR system in essence. So LiDAR, just as radar is, it's just a different wavelength, but using lasers to sense things in the environment. He thought it could be useful in Hollywood cameras. And then the driverless revolution started to pick up, and he knew it would be quite useful and powerful as
I remember correctly, it's significantly better in fog. Like fog doesn't affect it at all, but it's a way all the other was impossible or something.
Yeah, within rain, fog, it just has a higher performance than so Tesla you've mentioned. I don't know why. I think it's because the early LiDAR systems were so expensive that Elon Musk turned against them. And I think it's because he believes that super general artificial intelligence is closer than it is. So on Teslas, they use primarily cameras and some radar on the bumpers. Elon thinks that computation will become so powerful that even though the camera is what it's picking up is so weak that the software will nevertheless be so powerful that it can pick it up. Whereas, the alternative view is like, no, the hardware, the eyes, need more power. I don't care how powerful the software is. And so he's making strides. I think I love Musk as an entrepreneur. He could be the greatest entrepreneur of our time. But on the other hand, I think he's gone too far in describing the Tesla system as full self-driving. Because you can look on YouTube, there are so many Teslas
in ideal conditions.
Yeah. Luminar Technologies, founded by Austin Russell. They make a perception system for cars using LiDAR. And I think it does have, a lot of advantages. One of them is just at night. I mean, cameras at night just don't have the range that a laser system has. Yeah. So, the proof will be in the eating of the pudding. This is a competition. It's still ongoing. One of the interesting things is that there was so much hype about driverless cars. I think people were reaching further than they could actually grasp. In let's say 2018 or so, there's still some time to go on the development of these different technologies. And I think it's still very much an open question who's going to win the race. But I think it is true is that the systems that driverless cars will use one day are being used at much, lower functions. So it's like this driver assist stuff when it comes to just being aware of things on the highway or helping you park your car, that kind of thing. And so Luminar, they'll have units on Volvos starting this spring.
Wow. Okay.
And the company went public in 2020, which I recount in the book because I think it was just so extraordinary to meet this young man at 18. And then, this isn't always a good signal given Elizabeth Holmes and other people. Yeah. But he was on the cover of Forbes as the richest or the youngest billionaire at that time in 2020.
Hey, good for him.
Yeah.
I want to keep going about libertarian and free market solutions to innovation. If it's all right with you, hang out for a few. I'm going to bring a couple more people on.
Okay, great.
But first, everyone watching, check out all of our innovative libertarian businesses. Again, they're not paying us for this. We don't get paid for this, but just support your local libertarians. So what's up, everyone? We are back. Now that you know what products you should immediately go buy, support your fellow libertarians. I'm joined by three of my personal favorite people, but I'm going to start with Mike Ross, one of our governor candidates. Mike, you are running on a platform of two things. One, hashtag Fire the Uniparty. Two, libertarian solutions. No more of this silly talk like Fire the Uniparty, for example. No. But we love to stand on principle, and we worry about watering down our messaging. It ends up getting diluted when it comes to how does the free market actually generate solutions. So can you expand a little how you are promoting solutions from a free market, non-intervention government interventionist perspective?
Yeah, well, as I was listening in the waiting room to Michael, right, where he talked about, a lot of libertarians are pretty quick to denounce socialism as ineffective at solving problems, right? But we sure do embrace it in education, right? We're essentially just taking all of that, distributing it through the system, so much so that it's enshrined in the Constitution of the United States or of North Carolina, right? So we have to do that in North Carolina because it's in our Constitution. But my plan as governor is to bring that idea of letting the free market be the solution, right? So you just take that money, divvy it up, and force the public school system to compete with the free market, right? Because I think of the economics, right? Economics, I'm a financial planner by trade. That really drives my line of thought, is thinking through how's the money in this power structure divvying up, right? And really, teachers get the short end of the stick here, right? Like there's some teachers out there, some great educators that like make a difference in our lives when we're young people. And you know, I can credit a public school teacher with a lot of the ways that I think, right? Teaching me when I was young. And the problem is you have teachers that are really getting drastically underpaid for the value that they create in society. And if you forced the state, right, the structure of public education to actually compete with teachers, right? So my plan calls for, hey, as long as we're forced to do this, give all the control of the power and the money to the parents, right? Because the parent's going to care more about their kid. And that way, you know, they can go look at a school that has 2,000 kids. They can go look at a school where, you know, one teacher broke out and says, you know what, I'm going to take 15, 20 kids a year. The state of North Carolina spends about $10,000 per student. That teacher now has $150,000 to $200,000 budget to work with, can really go hands-on, customize, innovate in that space, work with, find out what clicks for each individual kid and teach them in a good way. And that's just one idea I can think of. And I'm sure there are thousands of ideas that the free market would think of that would even better innovate in that space. So as governor, I'm saying, you know, I see Republicans pushing for school choice. And, you know, I like the idea that you're pushing the money down there, but I look at the big picture and what I see with the slippery slopes in Washington as well as in North Carolina. And I think that all they're doing is really setting us up at some point in the future for the government to take over private education, right? Because if anytime they sand out money, they're going to attach strings. And that's why I specifically call for, hey, you handle it completely equitably, you divide it among the children, the parents decide, and the government has no say in it.
That's not your ideal. That's sort of, okay, this is what I'm working with. Then this is the best I can do for you.
Correct. And you know, if you fast forward, right, if this becomes the reality of education in North Carolina, fast forward, what happens? When you look at markets, right, that have minimal government intervention in the form of either throwing money at something or over-regulating them, generally you see prices come down, right? Cosmetic surgery, LASIK, most black markets, right, where there's things not there. You have a true, you know, the freer the market, the better competition can come in there. And I think what ultimately happens is when you have that, fast forward 10 years, you know, I won't call for the abolition of the public school system as a candidate, but I think if you force them to compete, they'll either get better and start getting better outcomes, or they'll abolish themselves to the free market. And if that's the way they go, you know, at the end of the day, it means the children of North Carolina are getting better educational outcomes. What more could we as taxpayers ask if you're going to take our money and force it to be spent on educating the public?
100% on particularly on the free market aspect. And Michael, I want to follow up on that broadly and then a little more specifically in terms of the innovations you talked about in your book. So one of the things I believe that can be controversial in some of these circles, but like I think climate change is a problem. I'm not an alarmist. I don't think the world's going to end in 7 years.
Right.
But I think there's a straight line between carbon being really good at retaining energy and the amount of carbon in the air and heat going up. So I'm like, hey, technology innovation can solve this. And one of the things you mentioned in your books is sort of no matter where you stand on climate change, look at the energy innovations we have going on.
Yeah, look, you have to take like the geological timescale of the Earth and just notice that, you know, the climate changes quite a bit over time. I mean, we've had ice ages.
And certainly that's a factor.
Right.
I do not mean to start a climate change discussion.
Yeah. Well, so that's what I mean is like, if we just consider that perspective, like forget what, you know, man has added or subtracted to the issue. Nevertheless, nature can be quite nasty to us. And so I think we do need to figure out ways to mitigate the effects of bad weather, maybe even reach the state where we can control it. There are lots of, let's say, issues that aren't directly related to the climate necessarily, but do have to do with the weather, which is like rain. I live in Colorado in the mountains, and the number one issue out here, and especially they call it like, what is it? The Intermountain West. It's like between the Sierras and the Rockies, is just water. There's not enough water. We've had a bad 10 years. And so it's like, okay, well, what can we do to innovate, you know, because I don't see a shortage of water. I see a shortage of innovation. And there's lots that we could do, from controlling the rain to, you know, building desalination plants and those types of things where we could solve this problem. So, yeah, I I don't have a, I think I'm more of like a lukewarmist when it comes to, I think, yeah, okay, maybe man has some contribution to warming. But on the other hand, I think there's just this bigger issue that that I think it would be best if we had a greater control of the environment as a whole.
I think we could probably all come to consensus that governments of the world stealing trillions of dollars from the populations of their citizens and funneling it to their crony friends and lobbyists is not going to be the solution that solves any of anything that we are doing. That's not going to be the solution.
So that's a really good segue. The government stealing a bunch of money and funneling it to their cronies. Deb, I want to go to you. Deb Philman, LP Mech, perhaps I would say the leading expert on education in North Carolina. But I'm hosting this, so I'm allowed to make bold statements without back. But Deb definitely knows education. And I know one of your big concerns is not just stagnation, but political will being enforced. So how do you see, particularly in this context, the credentialing trickling down, forgive the expression?
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, first of all, I want to say thank you to Michael because, I read the book, and as the book was opening and talking about the paper belt, I'm like, yes, I'm literally on the airplane and I'm listening to the audiobook, and my daughter was sitting next to me, we were heading to vacation, and I'm like exclaiming out loud, what is your problem? She's like elbowing me, Mom, you're saying words out loud, and I'm like, no, I'm like, you need to listen to it. She's like, I'm 15, but homeschooled, by the way. But here, I'm going to try to formulate my thoughts in an organized manner. You're spot on about college and all the problems and the focusing on time and the clock tower. And, like everything was just, yes. But as a person who focuses so heavily on K-12, my question for you is, how familiar are you with what the paper belt has done in terms of credentialing teachers and the pipeline for teachers, that it's now a horrible, terrifying circle jerk, for lack of a better term, so that
I'm gonna have to put an explicit rating on this.
Well, I'm sorry, but it's really quite sinister. Actually, it's not accidental. I mean, the reason you have these low rates of reading, high illiteracy and numeracy, by the way, and science, the knowledge and understanding of basic scientific concepts, non-existent. I mean, whatever you think about literacy, tests nationwide show that our kids are at like 20% of graduates nationwide are even at basic level in science. That's terrifying. In North Carolina, we don't even have a graduation standard for science. You have to take certain classes, but it's appalling to me that in the 21st century, this is our situation with these big problems that we have to solve. So we're not even beginning to cultivate genius, and we're going out of our way in many respects to tamp it down. And so what I wanted to ask you, Michael, is how familiar are you with the data mining that's been going on of our students using things like so-called social emotional learning programs through the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning, funded in part by the ultra spiritual Fetzer Institute and things like that. And they are gathering ridiculous amounts of data, and it's being co-owned by our government, who will own it for the full lifetime of the child, and many of these private enterprises, but they're not looking to find the next kernel of genius. And when you read the papers that Castle writes about how they hope to use the state, or how they hope to change the world and change the culture, it's not with an eye towards innovation. It's not with an eye towards, they'll talk about 21st century jobs, so we don't know what they're going to have and all that, but it's actually to change the world culturally and socially so that our children are predictable, so that our children are malleable, agreeable. In other words, this managerial class that dominates the paper belt also dominates all the way down to kindergarten, nursery school, daycare, etc. And it's with an eye towards serving these SDG and ESG goals of making the perfect little humans, and not perfect little humans that are going to go to work, to be Teal fellows and innovate the next great thing, but be perfect little cogs that, if you say your job is X, they go, yes, the greater good, the collective. Did you read A Wrinkle in Time?
Yes. Yeah, I love
Okay. You remember it?
it. Well, remind
Okay.
everyone.
As
Yeah,
I'm studying all of this and I'm looking
It was the big bad. They blew it up at the end.
as I'm looking at SEL and I read through all their journal papers and I look at all the, they're so excited about it. And if you watch some of their webinars for the WEF and UNESCO,
yeah,
they're unironically telling you how excited they are to make children absolute cogs.
right.
And individual goals, individual needs, individual genius, that no. So what I wondered the whole time I was listening to the book, was, isn't 18 too late? So you're quite right that, these kids should be starting working much sooner, but we are losing so much genius. A child at age 5 or 6, the percentage of children at that age who display creative genius or creative abilities is a huge percentage. With every subsequent year, it goes down, 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 down. And so what you're doing is fabulous. And
I want to say amen. And you're right. I don't address that in the book, but you're on to something very powerful. I'm a big fan of John Taylor Gatto, his books.
Yep.
Even Illich, The Deschooling of Society, which and I think they both touch on this idea that you're alluding to and hammering, more than alluding to, hammering on, which is like, if you have to raise your hand to go to the bathroom, it doesn't matter what kind of education you're delivering, you're educating subservience.
Yeah.
You're educating someone who needs permission to do like a basic human function. Well, what's going to happen when they have some idea that, they're not quite sure about?
Well, when they're told that thinking as an individual is subversive. So
I agree. So the medium is the punishment. It's not, it's like not even the content. We don't even have to talk about, wokeism, DEI, multiculturalism, whatever. It's like just the fact that you have to show up at a building, sit in a chair for 6 hours, raise your hand to go to the bathroom. I agree with you. This is horrific.
You could be loving the book you're reading, but now it's 9:45. It's time to move subjects.
Yeah,
Like, put that book away. How dare you enjoy that too much?
Yeah, totally. I think you're on to that. And you're also on to the other thing, which is like, and this came up in Mike's comment before, which was like, there are great teachers out there, but they're trapped in the system and no one learns from them. It's like that movie that dramatized the life of the teacher in LA, the Stand and Deliver. I mean, there are teachers like that who are extraordinary, but we learn nothing from them. It's like the system
and even
doesn't
they
care.
left teaching shortly after those films were made. Like they didn't even last. I mean, I lasted 2 years. I couldn't take it. So
yeah, I agree with you. Is like, okay, but and then it ties into a lot of Mike's comments. It's like, how do we get to the point where parents reject the idea that this regimented childcare is going to like lead to
I have an answer.
Okay. Well, look, I'm on the homeschool train, but yeah.
Well, okay. So one of the things that I do is I go out and I educate parents about the fact that they, to try to, unbrainwash them from believing they need some paper belt educated expert to educate their kids. You taught them to walk, talk, eat with a spoon, all that, you can do it. But what it all boils down to is they have a childcare problem. So I try to at least get them to wrap their minds around, okay, you don't have an education problem. You have a childcare problem. You have I need to go to work and I need my, especially an elementary school age child, safe and cared for with, some responsible older, adult, whatever. And then I think about people wanting to use machines in ed tech. So they say, well, we can solve the childcare problem, but we'll have like a warm body with 50 kids in a building. We'll stick them in front of screens. Yay, we solved the problem, like COVID. And of course, because I'm a fan of John Taylor Gatto's too, I'm like, no, it's like, we don't kids. If I in my 50s can like master this, we don't need to show them this at 6. They'll figure it out. So I really want to find out what your ideas are about helping innovators in this particular space to scale this type of thing. And when I say scale, I don't mean more kids, fewer teachers. I mean, fewer kids, pods, micro schools, things like that, but without this emphasis on the tech and the data. right? How can we
Yeah.
empower individual?
Oh man, no, yeah, we didn't touch on that comment you made. I think surveillance is terrible. I don't like the state. No data is better than big data.
Right.
The state should not be involved in collecting data on people. But leaving that aside, the homeschooling, yeah, I want to promote it. We're doing what we can as a fund. And what I will say is this to anyone listening, we're starting something this year. We do want to go younger and younger, not in the sense of funding people to start companies, but how do we liberate people from these systems and give them the resources they need to do, fantastic research or, to be creative.
Even the teachers, like you're talking about your co-founder, right? And she started that charter school.
Well, I mean, it was her experience with the charter school, and this point was made earlier as well, which was like she thought they had a lot of latitude to experiment and do things. It turned out, state of California gave maybe this much, and it was like it was better than what was before, but it was still incremental.
Right.
Maybe I'm too pessimistic, but I really think it is as simple that the state realizes that if they allow innovation in education, that the masses will realize how useless and unnecessary they are, because we've had enough technological advancement that there's so many.
Yeah, we need a dramatic counterexample. I think Uber and Lyft are a good example because, up until
I'm trying to shut them down
on this medallion system, it's total paper belt institution. You need a paper medallion to run a cab. And then Uber and Lyft come along, and it was demonstrably better than the cab. It came to your house, you could schedule it and all this.
Arguably, because
for education.
I honestly think school choice is the way that they're fighting back. And as people think that's going to liberate them. And I think it's actually the government's last gasp Trojan horse to fool people into believing they have a choice, but they're really not. It's like, you're just choosing which prison you want to go to. But it's not really fundamentally different to say, we, the government, are giving you this little fund or this little grant, and you're going to go take it to one of our approved schools that we, is following our program. How is that going to ultimately be? They did in Sweden 10 years later. There are no private schools and there's no homeschooling in Sweden because you don't need it, because you just take your money to any private school, except the private schools and the public schools are the one and the same in terms of what they offer. So what I've been trying to explain to parents is what you really want is teacher choice. You're not really looking for school building choice. You're looking for the type of human who is going to inspire and support and scaffold and all the things for your child. If it isn't going to be you, like if it were you, yay. But if you have other things you have to do, I understand that. But you're looking for teacher choice, and teacher choice is a completely different kind of thing. And I don't know that even money, like if I were going to do it, if somebody came to me and they said, okay, Deb, put your money where your mouth is. A group of parents get together, 10 parents, they say, we want to hire you to teach our kids K-5 skill level, whatever stuff. What would you charge us? And I think a lot of teachers would agree with this. We would charge a lot less than most parents think. In other words, if you just gave me the equivalent of a starting public school teacher, but I had that level of autonomy and you were involved and we could talk and we could innovate. All day, every day. We go into teaching. We want to do this because we love it. That's why we went in. That's why the good teachers go into it. The ones who go to the paper, blah, 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 blah. It's like, my summer's off. Blah, blah. So
now, do you know what
it doesn't have to be that expensive.
It's the reason kids were going to journalism school 20 years ago. They go to now to become activists, which is absolutely insane. You just talked about something that's interesting, and I think it is pervasive right now. So school is designed, like you said, raise your hand to go to the bathroom, become these autonomous little bots that follow the rules. And then what happens is you're taught to trust authority without questions. And when they tell you to be afraid, be afraid. And so I want to come to you on this one, Justin. A few weeks ago, the ATF said, hey, this little brace that makes it easier for a handicapped person, like a wounded veteran, to defend him or herself now makes you a felon. And in one fell swoop, what do we have? 280,000 felons. So how much do you think this willingness to accept, we're saying this is bad and it's bad, comes from education up? And how much do you think is perpetuated by just naturally anxious adults?
Well, one thing we see, as we've discussed with so many other things, the biggest impediment to innovation is government intervention. And nowhere is this more clear, perhaps, in the firearms community, because all of the innovation we've seen over the last 50 to 80 years is more concerned about circumventing laws written by people who watch movies than it is about actually innovating in the firearms community. I mean, one thing we've been talking about for 30 years now is smart guns. Smart guns, the idea being that if you pick my gun up, you can't use it. Only I can use my gun. The technology has barely advanced, and it's mostly advanced under the pushing of government incentives. But even that, the innovation isn't really there, because most people think that smart guns will be a way in which their firearms will be restricted. So you can have a smart gun, but you can't buy your Glock anymore. So I'm very much in favor of smart guns, because if I can program my smart gun like my cell phone, that it doesn't work for anyone except me and my family, great. You steal my gun, then you can't use it. You throw it in the river or whatever, and I'll go get another gun. But no one wants to invest in them, because none of the end users want to actually use their firearms, because they think that smart guns are just another way in which restrictions will be introduced. And you talk about that the stabilizing brace, that it's not 280,000, it's many, many millions of Americans are now guns if they haven't turned them over or destroyed them. 280,000 is how many people registered.
Like everyone we know.
Yeah. But the stabilizing brace was created to, like you said, enable people who are disabled to be able to fire a longer firearm.
Specifically for combat veterans, right? Like that was the original intent.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was originally created by a disabled with the consultation of a amputated combat veteran. But one of the things that they were immediately used for, because the ATF blessed off on it, and they said these are legal braces that you can put on AR pistols. What did everyone do? They went out and they bought a stabilizing brace so that they can effectively create a short-barreled rifle, circumventing the law. Because even the innovations that are used to improve certain styles or certain methods in the firearms community, those things are inevitably used to try to circumvent poorly written laws. And that's what we spend most of the time in the firearms community doing, is creating and circumventing new laws.
Not making things safer, which most people would be very interested in doing.
Yeah.
Certainly not.
There is a company called BioFire that seems to be making some progress on that smart gun issue, but you're right, it's a long time coming.
And BioFire, they're the leader in the space. I mean, there's a couple other companies, but BioFire is way ahead of everyone. And even they, I mean, from what I've seen, they're years away from getting a good, solid product out to the market, which could be a lot shorter if it had more commercial buy-in.
You know, you look at God, I argue with people about whether the American Revolution was worth it. It's such a funny topic, but the counter argument is that slavery, let's say we stayed as a part of the British Empire, slavery was abolished in 1804 or 5 or something, and then if you look at Canada and New Zealand, Australia, you know, they're doing pretty well. It wouldn't, you know, what's the big deal? But I think when you look at the creativity and dynamism of America, it's just unparalleled. And then you look at the response to COVID, and the most authoritarian, like soft totalitarian responses seem to come from places like New Zealand and Canada
still,
right? And so what is the distinguishing feature? Well, one of them is 2A. It's like, you cannot shut down America completely. There was always this resistance because, you know, we do have a well-armed citizenry. And so I think education is the same. It's like, I wish we thought about that more, where, you know, to, you know, Deborah's point is like, just like we have guns to defend ourselves. It's like, we need to also protect our inner freedom from the government, which is like, you know, we need freedom from indoctrination, freedom from manipulation, freedom from all these soft forms of power that the state can exercise through the educational system. So yeah, it's like the gun is a symbol of that in the United States, and we have seen stagnation. You're right, because it's just like, so it's not only just regulated, it's also just taboo. It's like you're breaking some, you know, to the left, it's like horrific that you would even talk about it. You know, we do struggle with this as a fund, but directly. So like, we had a young man from MIT. I met him when he was a teenager. And he invented a new propulsion system for projectiles using hydrogen. And, we had the debate, is this something we should back? We ended up backing him. It's called Mach Industries. And one of the advantages of the hydrogen-based system, not for handguns or rifles, but it looks like it's going to be used for some type of artillery system, is it can take out balloons at really high altitudes.
Oh, nice.
So
we
instead
need
of
some.
instead of wasting $300,000 on some missile, we can just shoot those types of things down. I just heard a pitch today, actually, from a young man who invented a new type of ammunition, and it's like, okay, it goes faster, farther, and it's cheaper, but there's always this question, like, what's that?
Is that ammunition lead free?
And it's lead free.
I'm interested.
Okay.
I think that's one of the things the firearms community needs most in innovation.
Yeah.
Lead-free ammunition.
So it's almost like I want to support the young man just because it's so unusual and it's so frowned upon in our culture. But I do think it is a bulwark against totalitarianism or soft forms of authoritarianism and that kind of thing.
We were talking about the incentives, why, like, one word that I actually wince at when I hear it in relation to education is innovation. And it can't be like, but I think it's because I keep wanting to really clearly define it. And mostly when people talk about innovation in the education space, they talk about changing praxis, pedagogy and praxis. And that's how we ended up with some of this crazy garbage that has no basis in reality in terms of actually making anyone smarter or more capable. It just typically costs a lot of money and gives teachers something to, in graduate school, something to publish. And what the paper belt has done by credentialing teachers in this way, by the fact that we rely on these kinds of credentialed teachers to teach our children, is we've created these perverse incentives where they keep innovating. But the innovations, there's no one really holding them accountable, because they have a giant honeypot of money from the government.
Right.
There's no one holding them accountable for the results. So our children have been experimented on since the day one, since they created this system. And John Taylor Gatto talks about this pretty much, the Prussian system and everything.
Right.
But they just keep, their innovation actually should be called experimentation. And our kids are the lab rats. But it's not even experiments that are based on solid scientific theory. Even a theory has to first be like,
throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah, well, before you guys have given money out, you've had to see something in the way of a proposal that sounds credible. It's not just like, I'm going to personally put on wings and fly to the moon. But their educational theories are about that, grounded in reality. And yet the government comes along and goes, here's a bunch of money. Because it's not ours, so we don't care. And they just throw money at stuff. And then you won't wake up 30 years later and say, oh, maybe we should go back to phonics. Like,
you actually make a really good, interesting point there. And Michael, I'd love to ask you about this, because when you get that certificate, so you ride the paper belt to the end, and now you're at, like, I don't know, the paper highway or something, whatever it may be. You feel entitled to that next thing. What have you seen, Michael, in terms of talking to some of, these 18-year-olds who are defying physics, but just their earnestness, perhaps, as opposed to the entitlement of people who have the certificate?
Yeah, there is a distinction there. I think, we have some system, the institutions I mentioned before, the government, where I think if you take on people who aren't quite bright or up to snuff or productive, it's not going to damage the productivity of the institution that much. So they're able to add on a lot of dead weight. And I think the paper belt has also become, there's this concept of the overproduction of the elite. And what that really means is, like, the so-called elite, these people who, like, rose through the paper belt and became good at, writing essays and taking these tests. And then they do feel entitled to a certain way of life when they come out of that system. And maybe they do get it for a little bit because they're part of this institution that probably shouldn't exist anyway. like, the Department of Education, perhaps, or something, right?
Department of Education.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there's that. There's something Deborah said, I think I didn't address earlier, that I think is important, which is, you're right, this like over credentializing of the educational system, where you in the regulations differ in different places, but like, who's to say who can be a teacher except for whether or not they can teach, right? I mean, let's see what the performance is. The fact that you require the paper to become a teacher is just absurd, and I think is holding the system back. Yeah, that it really does distort life so much that you question. It's like, geez, why participate at all? Even if there are benefits here and there, it's like, yeah, the homeschooling crowd, it's like, you could do worse than just like, giving your kids some books.
Well, I do believe the solution is going to come from disruption.
Yeah.
Like just hardcore disruption. So when you're talking about disrupting the higher ed, I want to see more people. It's what, like, my life mission pretty much is to encourage more people to be disruptive in their own lives with their own children's education. Even if it's one kid at a time, it's still an improvement, because I don't think we need to get to, even 50%. I think if we could get to about, I know it's ambitious, but like 20% of Americans homeschooling their children, or just basically opting out,
destroys,
and going towards a parallel educational ecosystem.
Let me throw this one out for everyone, and this is pushing back a little, because I've thought about this a lot. And Michael, I actually have no idea if you have children, but Mike has kids, Deb has kids, I got kids. Deb said Mike's kids' age.
No, not yet.
Fair enough. And I think Justin's in the no not yet crowd too, but you don't have to have kids. I am just saying, I'm thinking about it from a parent's perspective. Do you think there's an argument that the credentialing system as it is has a place for some percentage of the kids? Like, there's some that it works very well to just kind of become another brick in the wall, follow the path.
Okay. All right. Here's what I would say is school. There is a role for school in some children's lives, but I'm going to be very specific here. Classical school.
Okay.
So I think Michael's going to relate, because you have a more classical education, right?
Yeah.
There are children, in particular, children who come from fairly dysfunctional backgrounds, where they have a lot of chaos in their lives, and they're not ever going to be exposed organically to a lot of the things that Michael was exposed to as a child, that I was exposed to as a child, maybe everybody here for that matter, in terms of books, in terms of just knowledge about human life on planet Earth, okay? Which is really, I believe, what a classical education gives you. Is the best of the past. That's what classical is. It stood the test of time. And so, and that's not to say there's nothing new that you can learn, but it also follows the child's developmental stages. The trivium follows where the kid is at developmentally. And for those kids, I have a woman that I absolutely admire to the nth degree, Catherine Burblesing. She has a school in London called the Michaela Academy. It wins award after award after award.
Yeah, I'm well familiar with it. Yeah.
Amazing school.
She's a disruptor.
Yeah. Now, if she's a disruptor in a very traditional, it's almost like retro, okay? But what I would call it is education 4.0. Okay, so if education 1.0 was the classical, you have a tutor and there are like 5 or 6 people sitting in a Socratic setting, like back in ancient Greece or something. Okay, that's 1.0. And then that extended through to the aristocracy having their private tutor and their, few little kids, landed gentry, and everybody else is illiterate. Right, that's 1.0. 2.0 might have been like, okay, now we built our little schoolhouse on the prairie, and we have one teacher who's, the 18-year-old who's very well read, who had the 1.0 education, perhaps because their parents hasn't, but now they're going to go and they're going to educate some of the masses kids, and they're going to, do that. Okay, so that's 2.0. Now we have more literacy, but it's still pretty basic. You're not going to go to college or any kind of university. You're just going to be a very well-read farmer. Okay, fine. That's pretty much what we had in the revolution. We had very well-read farmers carrying John Locke pamphlets in their pockets. Education 3.0 is what we're still living in. Education 3.0 comes about where you have the Deweys and the Horace Manns and all of these guys who come along and say, we've been to Germany and we see all these these dark and swarthy people coming to America with their different languages. And we've got all these free slaves that are coming up to the north, and we got, we need industry, and we need good little happy factory workers now. And we want them to be good citizens, not aspire to too terribly much and be unruly and everything. We can make the perfect human, the early progressives. And we're still there. So we're still in 3.0, which is, we're still trying to make the perfect human. We're just trying to adapt it to like this century, but we're still trying to make and manage. 4.0, in my view, is we go back to the beginning, but we make that available to everyone. That's the real democratization, or, whatever, equity or whatever, because there's no reason. I've seen it with Marva Collins in Chicago. If you see what she did with the forgotten children, teaching them Plato and Aristotle, whatever, these kids were they're retarded. They're not going anywhere. And they grow up to be doctors and lawyers. Catherine Berbelsing is doing the same thing. I think they're on the cusp of being able to provide that kind of education for a broader swath of people by just saying, okay, we can take the best of modernity and combine it with the best of the classical system and come up with something completely different. And it might not be always the same model, but we're not going to leave out that classical stuff. We might just change it depending on the audience. So for the budding little geniuses, we're going to grow up and be Teal Fellows. Okay. These kids are, maybe it's more Montessori-esque. Maybe it's more like, here's all your things to play with and experiment with in circuitry and whatever, and go, run, fly, be free. And for those kids who are coming out of mom's a drug addict and I can we don't even have an alarm clock in the house, and okay, classical. But the point is that we have options available that are not just trying to take one model and mass deliver it like in a factory situation, but where you can say this is, here are these different options for different kinds of kids with different kinds of needs, but our innovation is to go backwards and take what is great, what produced all this wonderful knowledge.
Yeah.
Well, we got a lot out of the classical model for a long, long time. And I think we need to bring it back, especially for those kids. I really, really do. And the kids who don't necessarily need that, fly and be free.
It's a cliche that we throw around, but it's because it's so true. It used to teach people how to think. Now we're trying to teach them what to think.
Yeah.
We didn't even do that, though. We didn't teach anyone how to think. We didn't get in the way of thinking.
Okay, well, that's fair.
Yeah, I think they try to teach them not to think now.
That's what they do.
Yes.
If you read Ayn Rand's Comfort Chico's essay, written in 1970, so she took what Victor Hugo wrote about the Comfort Chicos, and then she wrote from a 1970 perspective on the different stages of education and how it prevents the formation of concepts. What it's doing to the little mind, it will break your heart, but you'll see it in today's system. And what I think we did in the past was we recognized accurately that in order to have thoughts, in order to think, you need a vocabulary. You need a broad.
That's the whole basis of 1984. I mean, that's the entire first section of 1984 is about how controlling language controls.
Restrict the number of words that a person has at their disposal. You restrict the number of thoughts and the complexity of the thoughts they can have. So the way you acquire that particular kind of vocabulary is reading, whatever you can get your hands on. And do not facilitate that in our schools. They don't have enough time. They don't have freedom to even think about what they want to read. They're too much on tech. And so they need that. They need to just marinate in as much exposure to as much knowledge as possible. And then when you get to those preteen years, earlier, now the kid can go, I think I want to do quantum physics. What is quantum physics?
Right.
Otherwise, they'll get all the way to 12th grade and be like, quantum, what the hell?
I want to do.
I don't even know what it is.
There is one interesting parallel because I don't necessarily think, situationally speaking, it's always bad to have that programming. And so, Justin, you were military, right? You want to be pretty reflexive when you're in a combat situation. For example, you don't want to sit and be free thinking if your squadron's depending on you to be in a certain position. I mean, I don't know military tactics, but from that perspective, how do you see the distinction? What are the combat, no questioning authority, go with versus now what we're being told to do?
Well, when I was a newer Marine, what we call a boot, I had a notebook of about 50 pages of acronyms, which were literally just like a little short word,
With
and it told you
SG.
exactly how to do whatever you were doing. We had them for how to assault a position. We had them how to lay in a machine gun. We had them how to dig in a machine gun. We had how to set up a defensive position. Anything you could think of, we had a little ditty in our head that we had yelled 50,000 times by that point that we knew by heart. And it's a great way of cementing the basic concepts in something. But then the trouble came up is when you're under stress and you're trying to get a young person to explain what they're doing and figure out how to do what they're doing, it's gone. Like
Wow,
they can sit there and yell the ditty and they can do whatever they're being told. And actually it's kind of funny is the military kind of goes in the opposite direction, right? We teach you how to be an automaton and just do whatever someone tells you to do. Yes, sir, no, sir, I, sir. And then as you go, you can be a little more of a person, a little more of a person. They start teaching you the why and the how. And it's not super effective, in my opinion. And is one of the reasons that irreconcilable differences found me leaving the Marine Corps when I did, is because I eventually wanted to be more of a person. So in that respect, like it has its function, maybe. I think a lot of the issue, though, is, by the time you get to the military, you've had 15 to 20 years, mostly of public school and mostly of the worst public schools in the country, educating your military. And so I'm interested, Deborah's talking a lot about teacher choice and things. And I'm interested if maybe we stop spending so much time teaching kids not to think. Like,
We lost Justin for a minute. Well, Mike, I saw
right at the important moment.
Justin, you said if we spent less time teaching kids not to think.
Yeah, I think if we spent less time teaching kids not to think, by the time they get to 9th or 12th grade or whatever, and they no longer have thoughts or opinions of their own, then we can just, we could spend less time teaching from building blocks, like little children, literally teaching building blocks, like one block on top of the other. And so kids can educate themselves if we're not putting so many things in their way to tell them to stop learning on their own.
It's not okay in school, as Michael wrote in the book, to be comfortable being the only person in the room who holds a specific idea. Like everybody else holds an idea and yours is different.
Which is, libertarians love being that person.
And I've been that person my whole life. It was just, I can't even say that I learned how to be that. I don't know how I was an outcast my whole life because I was the person who was like, what?
Right.
No matter where I went, if it didn't make sense, you were going to hear from me. And I was the bane of every teacher's existence because everything had to make sense. And if something didn't make sense, when I say make sense, I needed to know the why, and I needed to understand. I had to take things apart and deconstruct things and put them back together. And
that's how you learn.
Right. But teachers, well, I was fortunate. I went to Montessori school in the early years. And that, you just get to do that. And then I got stuck in a public school, and I remember it so well. I literally felt like I was sent to some kind of prison, because to go from that environment and then be stuck in 4th grade, like right away, like here you are, there's your desk, this is this and that is that, and you can't do this and you can't do that. And I was like, but I just want to read today, because I was able to do that in Montessori. And so my rebellion was I kept doing the Montessori thing in the public school. And of course, I was all over my report cards, and my dad's taking me to therapy, and they're like, she's just not going to be college material because she can't follow rules and all this. And, fast forward, I graduated college and graduate school. But I think that the people, we don't teach kids how to be comfortable in their own skin at all. We tell them, in fact, you should not be comfortable in your skin.
We encourage the opposite.
And, be very sensitive to what other people think of you all the time. And then if you were to voice another opinion, it's downright dangerous. So we've gone from the peer pressure of you want to fit in, all the way to you could get your ass seriously kicked if you ask the wrong question.
I miss Generation X represent individualism still mattered to us, but
100%.
So I want to respect people's time, but there is an experiment I want to mention, and then give Michael a parting thoughts opportunity. but this was something they taught us about at the very beginning of our MBA program. So Wake Forest does a cohort program. We're all in there at the beginning, and we watch this experiment, and it's a group of kindergartners, a group of engineers, and a group of MBA students. And they have marshmallows, straws, tape, and a 5-pound weight. And the goal is to create a structure that can hold the weight up using only those materials. The kindergartners kick the other two groups' butts every time because they just tried stuff. And if it didn't work, they tried something else. The engineers did okay. They planned it out. They were at least, making strides towards something that could support the weight. The MBAs spent more time arguing about who was responsible for like what aspect of managing the project. But it was crazy. It was like kindergartners get it. Like this is going to work.
But one of their daddies probably has a hedge fund, so they'd get that bridge built anyway.
So parting thoughts. I got 2 questions for you, Michael, because I want to hear what you think, like at what stage we really have snuffed out the innovation at a societal level, and sort of what's the long-term harm of that. But then I've been asking people at the end, the guests that come on, to leave us with some hope. Like, what do we have to look forward to? What are you seeing that's positive?
Okay, tall order. Yeah, that's a cool experiment. I haven't seen it, but interesting you say that, because I met someone who was a graduate of the Yale Business School, and they told me about this same experiment. So the lessons to be drawn from that are fascinating. That quick experimentation without preconceived notions might be more effective than coming up with this plan and using our mind in some educated way. I don't know, something like that. I think creativity is a mystery. I really do. It's so fascinating to me because it's rare, it's precious, and it can occur at the level of the individual, but it can also occur at the level of the city or the nation. Like when I say that we've slowed down technologically, it means that we're not as creative as we used to be. So what's going on? So yeah, what is the hope? It's like, okay, the current system is broken. We can just look at the results and no one can be happy with this. I don't know how that's satisfactory. And I'm doing my part through 1517. I write about it in the book because I want to get the message out there, reach out to us, because, we want to liberate people so that they can, explore ideas even if they're not socially approved by the majority. I think that's like, we sometimes we make a point of saying, hey, it's not about the degree, and we do back older people, but I have to say there is something about younger people who pursue things, because like this example with the children and the marshmallows, it's like, if you haven't been indoctrinated by what's possible, if you haven't, like, if these categories of the status quo haven't been imposed on you, then you just have a fresh way of thinking, or, you're not constrained by expectations. There's some story, I don't know how true it is, I hope it's true, but apparently it inspired the Good Will Hunting movie, that there was someone at MIT, he was like a grad student or something, and he was late to class. What he didn't know is that, like, this professor was presenting this problem on the board that was like one of the top unsolved problems in this field of mathematics. And because this young man was late, he didn't hear that preface that, like, no great mind has been able to solve this problem. So he shows up late and he just thinks like this is the homework assignment, and he goes off and he solves the problem. And like, the moral of the story is, like, because he didn't have the expectations that, like, no one had solved this before and all these great people have attempted it, he, with that fresh mind, he was able to do it. No, the footnote is like, okay, I wish I knew this was validated, but I wish it's true, because I think there is truth to the story that, that, like, a lot of these institutions, schools and so on, they actually just limit our horizons rather than expanding them. And we're doing our part to break that hold and liberate people, because I think, libertarians are very concerned about coercion. They're very much concerned about external controls on our freedom. But I think we also have to fight the inner battle against preconceived notions, dogma, manipulation, indoctrination. All these things are crowding in on us and stopping, what could be a new renaissance.
Become ungovernable. Hey, Deb, Justin, Mike, thank you so much. you all actually did do your research. I appreciate it immensely. That was a really good conversation. You knew what you're talking about. And then Michael, thank you. Like, this was awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Great conversation.
My pleasure.
Thank you for taking on the paper belt.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
I look forward to
I
meeting
want
you
to
all.
say that because it takes guts. We're talking about people with lots of money and power and a lot to lose, and they have a very specific agenda.
Yeah.
And anybody who's going to try to disrupt that and try to change the status quo has my full support. So, thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Deborah.
So if you're listening, Paper Belt on Fire, I will drop a link to both the publisher and the Amazon in the description of this video. What is it? William Blake 87? I forget your.
Oh no, on Twitter I'm William Blake. I was a journalist at the time when Twitter started, so I thought it was this service for haiku. So I signed up as one of my favorite poets, William
Hey,
Blake.
that works. Just trying to set something on fire. Maybe we get a representation of a tiger for it. Yeah, so give Michael a follow, buy the book, comment on the podcast, reach out. I hope to get you back. This was a really good conversation. And Deb, Justin, and Mike, I think you're all
Mike, good luck on the campaign. Justin, yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, let Peter know that
Thanks
Mike's
for your time,
accepting donations. Thank you all very much. Take it easy.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, hey there, everybody. It's Dub and Gru, and this week I'm back with my good buddy Travis Gru. How's it going out there?
It's good, man. I'm back from Vegas, had a great time, and we actually won the bet that Vegas would win the Stanley Cup. It wasn't a lot of money, but I'll tell you, it's fun to do sports betting, which is going to be what we talk about a little bit tonight. What's the update on the sports betting situation in North Carolina? Can you update us on that?
Well, yesterday, our beloved lame duck governor actually signed the legislation to make sports betting legal in North Carolina beginning January 8th next year, no later than June 14th. That'll be up to all the participating parties involved. And as the governor said, they're going to need help as well, sort of meet them halfway. And I know all these entities want to get started in the state of North Carolina because now North Carolina becomes the 28th state of the union since the Supreme Court basically broke Las Vegas's monopoly on sports betting, back a few years ago.
Right. Now, what do you think that the delay is? Is it just getting set up and getting the machines set up at these places? Because it's going to be about 6 or 7 places in the state, right?
Right. It'll be 2 country clubs, one in Greensboro, one in Charlotte. It'll be 2 racetracks, North Wilkesboro and Charlotte Motor Speedway, all the major arenas of North Carolina. And there's also one for the Down East folks in Wilmington, but I cannot recall its name right now. But there are 8 initial ones. And that's one of the good things about this law is that it seems to be keeping things in the hands of private operators.
Right.
And not turning it into a sort of gambling ABC board.
Yeah, we don't want that.
No, we don't want that. And, I started thinking about it and I said, they have a form of this in New York State that always intrigued me. In New York State, they have these little parlors called NYSOTB. And of course, OTB is off-track betting because there's a lot of racetracks up there, like Saratoga and Belmont and all the others. And you can just bet on the horse races, but that is completely run by the state. They are not privately owned betting sites. It is their version of the ABC, but it's for gambling. And that's sort of not what I want to see because they're just cold looking buildings, just distant with, generic letters on the side. And that's just.
Well, I am excited that the PNC Arena here in Raleigh is going to be one of the locations. And I've got a quote here from Don Waddell. He's the president and general manager of the Carolina Hurricanes. He says, We are extremely grateful for all the hard work by lawmakers from both sides of the aisle to get this bill to the finish line. We will now have the opportunity to build a world-class sports wagering facility to expand entertainment options around PNC Arena. Our plans will also include a restaurant and a bar available to fans every day, helping to spur additional development in and around the arena district, which is really awesome because I think you touched on this last week. It gives people something else to look forward to with sports. They may actually pay attention to sports that they may haven't cared about in the past, because now they could throw $5, $10, $15 in and it won't break the bank, and it makes it fun. So I believe it brings more engagement in sports. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I completely agree. It's like I said last week, that's the thing that's going to help this state. It's not going to be the big ticket players that contribute to this fund. It's going to be the $5 and $10 and $20 folks that put in a little money every week, just some extra little folding money they might have just for fun. And of course, they'll have it ramped up during football season. They'll definitely have it ramped up during ACC tournament and NCAA tournaments, especially here in this state. And of course, during the races in Charlotte for the Coke 600 and the fall playoff race at the Roval. So,
yeah, I completely agree. It's going to give people something else to look forward to and something to do. And maybe I'll actually pay attention to basketball, because I really never did before, or even horse racing or golf. I typically don't watch those sports, but I might now, if you can throw a little money at something just for fun. So I'm excited about that. We've got the PNC Arena here in Raleigh. I don't know if that's where you'll be participating in sports betting, but people around the state will be able to go to their local spot and hang out and have fun and, get a beer and get something to eat and do some sports betting. It's really cool. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. But what I also like about the law is that from day one, it will not only be available for in-person bets, but they will license the mobile people to contribute to the betting as well. And so we'll be a both state. One of the things about
through the playbook out of Caesar's Palace or something like that, or how will they do it?
Yeah, a lot of the websites now you can mobile bet in the states where it's legal to do so, and of course they do that by geolocating.
Yeah,
and that's what a lot of North Carolina people do. I know a few that personally go north of the border. They go just into Danville, Virginia, not even a mile into the line to geolocate and place legal wagers on games.
Yeah,
because they know they can't do it in North Carolina.
Well, like I said, I was just in Vegas and I bet a little bit of money on Vegas Golden Knights to win it all. And sure enough, they won it all. So now we have to collect our money via online, or they'll send us a check. You know what I mean? So it's interesting how they do it. But what else do we need to talk about? The Carolina Panthers, any updates with them?
Well, they just broke OTAs, and camp will now start sometime in late July. I believe it's July 26th.
Yeah.
And so as we already know, Bryce Young's been elevated to the number one quarterback and just keeps making impression upon impression on each of the veterans of the team. And speaking of veterans, I've been hearing
I like him a lot, man.
Oh yeah. I've also heard this. I've heard that Minnesota may have made a mistake by letting Adam Thielen go. Because apparently he is still as good in the slot as he ever was. And he doesn't seem to have lost a step, or either he's gotten a new berth being in a new city. So that's actually good to hear because we haven't had good slot receiving in a good long time, at least not since a certain number 89 used to roam the sidelines, but he was always good at slot and going long.
Right.
So,
yeah, I still miss Greg Olson. So
and he was a great tight end.
Yeah, he was.
And also the other good thing, I think they're starting to use LaVisca Chenault as a normal wide receiver, not just a gadget player or a screen wide receiver. So if he can actually get some depth on that, that would be wonderful, and have a sort of 3-horse race for wide receiver in the Panthers camp.
You going to go to any games this year?
I don't know yet. It's still too early to tell. But another thing we need to talk about is that now that the NBA finals are over, because they were over pretty darn quickly, as I predicted, it's time to think about the draft. And I really do think that Charlotte is going to go Scoot Henderson, and that he would be a great pair to pair with Mr. Ball at the point.
You said that last week, and I agree with that.
And also, speaking of the Ball family, Daddy Ball, Lamar, will be in Charlotte at the I can't remember whether it's at Penn House or one of the restaurants in Charlotte, doing one of the draft parties to see who they pick to pair with the son. So that's going to be very interesting. It'll be his first trip back to Charlotte ever since he was cut by the original Carolina Panthers back in 1995.
Yeah, that will be interesting.
Yeah. And that's about it, because we're now in the doldrums of the sports world with just baseball going on.
Yeah.
So we are not that far away from the purest doldrum of the year, where there will be no sports going on, which is the off day before the Major League Baseball All-Star game.
What are we going to talk about when that happens?
I don't know. Maybe we'll do a recap of how baseball's gone on to the midpoint, or
start talking
maybe
about
if Raleigh should have a baseball team over Charlotte. That's a very interesting one.
Cornhole or something like that, you know?
Yeah, the American Cornhole League. Yeah, that would be interesting. So, but anyway, I think that's about all we can say for tonight, because this, like I said, was mostly a gambling podcast, but unfortunately, as we said, it won't be available till 2024. So we'll see you then.
Looking forward to it.
Yes.
We want to go to Vegas.
Yes, no more going to Vegas. No more having to do a day trip up to Cherokee.
You think we'll get some casinos in North Carolina eventually?
Maybe. So
yeah.
Other than that, I have nothing further. Do you have anything further?
I am good, and we appreciate you watching the greatest news show of all time here at Liberty Inc. Thank you for watching.
Y'all have a good one.